here for you today. Our first speaker needs no introduction because you've just seen her. My former boss and friend, Lina Orenstein, president of Center for American Progress Action Fund. Yeah, I'm good. Hi. Hey, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here with the National Women's Law Center and for your amazing work in this rally in like tsunami-like conditions. I'm really thrilled to be here speaking with so many powerful women around the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh and to demand that this confirmation process stop until there is a full, fair, and public investigation into the allegations made against him. I join every person here and millions across our country in declaring loudly and clearly that I believe Dr. Christine Ford. I believe Anita Hill, and I believe that every woman should have the right to tell the truth about their experience, regardless of when that assault took place, when she decides to come forward, or how powerful and well-respected the attacker is. Dr. Ford must have the opportunity to tell her story to the public in a time and place which respects her dignity and her humanity. And after she testifies, the Senate must conduct a full public investigation that is fair and focused on finding out the entire truth. And I say to Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski, this is the time for you to stand up, but it's not just about you. It is about every senator, Republican male senators, Democratic senators, to stop and actually ask about the truth here. Until Dr. Ford testifies and until an independent public investigation is completed, the Senate must not do anything to move this process forward. The Senate must do nothing to provide Brett Kavanaugh with a lifetime confirmation to the Supreme Court. What message would it send to our daughters and all our children if our nation turns a blind eye toward credible accusations of sexual assault against two members of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas and now a possible Justice Kavanaugh? I know every person will fight with every ounce of energy we have until the American public knows the truth about Brett Kavanaugh and hold every single senator accountable if they stand in the way. This is a moment of truth for the country. This is a moment of truth for America's women. This is a moment of truth for our children and our democracy. And I know we can prevail. Thank you.
Can you believe the rain just stopped? It's a sign. And I grew up in Oregon, and I say, no rain is ever going to stop us. And then here we are. I'm waiting for the sun to come out. I'm Liz Shuler. I'm Secretary-Treasurer of the National AFL-CIO. 12.5 working people, 6.5 million working women in the labor movement. And I am here to say that we demand better than Brett Kavanaugh. Right. And I want to thank our partner organizations. We stand in solidarity with all of you today because nominating and confirming a Supreme Court justice is a sacred responsibility. And every nominee requires the highest level of scrutiny. By any measure, Brett Kavanaugh fails this test. Brett Kavanaugh's judicial record alone is a strike against working people. He has consistently ruled against common sense workplace health and safety protections, and that means more of us get sick, it means more of us get hurt, it means more of us die. And Brett Kavanaugh was unfit for the Supreme Court before Dr. Ford came forward with her story, and now an accused sexual predator could soon be placed on the Supreme Court with a say on the future of women's and worker rights. Think about that for a second. Think about the gravity of that. This is not okay. This is not acceptable. Listen to women, and working women say the Senate must reject Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. Thank you. All right, the skies have opened up so they can hear our message. Thank goodness. I'm Fatima Goss. I'm president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center. And I'm here today for Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I'll talk about Judge Kavanaugh in a minute, but today I am here to talk about her courage for coming forward. I'm here to say that all of us are standing with you. I'm here to say that you deserve to be treated with dignity and with respect, and that starts right now with a process that will mean that you get treated with dignity and respect. And we know what the opposite of that looks like. It was not that long ago, in 1991, when we saw the Senate Judiciary Committee do the exact opposite of what they should do. And that memory of treating Professor Anita Hill as if she were a criminal for coming forward, treating Professor Anita Hill, who dared to name her experience as if she had no right to do that, shaming her and blaming her, is a national embarrassment and continues to be a stain on this country and a stain on this court. So we have an opportunity to do something different. Right now, we have something that we did not have in 1991. Right now, we have the Me Too movement, which has so brilliantly been framed by Tarana Burke, to inspire us to have a different approach to harassment and violence. We know now that we can actually believe survivors. We know now that we can actually support them. And we know now that we don't have to take people through processes that are unfair, unjust, and leave people feeling worse than they did before they came forward in the first place. So I already knew that Brett Kavanaugh was not who we needed for the Supreme Court. We knew that from the little bits of record that we were allowed to see. We knew that from his judicial opinions that did not respect women's dignity, that did not respect autonomy, that did not allow workers to have a fair shake. We knew that from his speeches in which he glorified Justice Rehnquist's views on abortion. We knew that Brett Kavanaugh was not the right person. We knew that after his hearing where his credibility was called into question again and again and again when he said they're the opposite of what his documents showed. So in light of all that, there should be no vote this week. There should be no process that's just sort of a slam bam, get it through, we talk to her and done with that. This moment deserves more. This moment calls out for far more. It calls out for something that is fair, that is comprehensive, that tells not just Dr. Ford, but tells all survivors that we see you, we hear you, we know you deserve better. So what is at stake right now? What's at stake is the Supreme Court. What's at stake is our democracy, but at stake is also our ability to continue to tell survivors we see you, we hear you, we support you, and I will keep fighting to send that message day in and day out. Thank you. All right, thank you, Fatima. My name is ELISA McBride. I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, And I am proud to stand here with these sisters. And I know you can't clap because you're holding an umbrella or a phone because you're tweeting this out. And so I just want you to say, right on, Sister Liz, right on, Sister Nira, right on, Sister Fatima. We are with you. Right on. And I'm here because I represent social workers and sanitation workers and school employees and child care providers, public service workers who never quit on their communities, who understand what public service means. And we stand for democracy in the workplace and in our nation. We stand for excellence in public service. And we stand for opportunity and freedom for all Americans. And that's what this court right behind me should be all about. And that's what every justice who serves on this court should be all about. And as these sisters said, this nominee does not live up to our standards. He didn't before. He certainly does not now. We've opposed this nomination because on issue after issue, Brett Kavanaugh has ruled for wealthy corporate interests against working women, against working people. And the process has lacked transparency and has shown a reluctance to share the information we need and our representatives, our senators need to make this vital decision. So now these charges from Dr. Ford are deeply troubling. And it's time to say, even though time's up for sexual harassment and sexual violence in our nation, time is not up for this process. We have the time to conduct a fair and a thorough and a non-partisan process because the stakes are high. This is a lifetime appointment. The lives of women will be affected for decades. So what do we say to speeding this process ahead? You can say it with me. We say no, hell no to moving this fast when we have a process that we need to go through. We need a thorough, nonpartisan, and fair process. This nation stands for that. Ask Me surely stands for that. And we are here to say, let's hear the truth. Thank you. My name is Sage Carson. I am the leader of Know Your 9, a movement led by survivors against violence in school. I'm a survivor of campus sexual assault, and I believe Dr. Ford. I was assaulted my freshman and sophomore year by college peers of mine. After my assault, mutual peers turned their back on me, made jokes towards me about the assaults, and sided with my abusers over me. I will never forget the feeling of watching my peers turn their back on me and ignore my story to ease the facts that they were supporting rapists because it was easier to hold than holding someone accountable. I imagine Dr. Ford may feel the same way. To avoid my abusers, I stopped going to class, the cafeteria, the gym, and gatherings with friends. The violence I experienced isolated me from the world and plummeted my GPA. The school threatened to take away my scholarship that allowed me to attend the institution and put me on academic probation. Despite all of this, I didn't report the violence until a year later. I had seen how my peers had distrusted me. I saw everyone turn their back on me so they could continue their relationships with my abusers. I saw how this world treated survivors when they came forward about sexual violence. I saw what happened when women in my family came forward about sexual violence. And I saw what had happened to Anita Hill. When I finally came forward, I ended up dropping my case after a school administrator told me, "We're just really worried about telling him that the work he has put into his degree possibly won't matter because of this." Instead of my school holding my abuser accountable, I switched majors, lost 2 years of credit hours, and my career I'd been working towards since I was 12. The career and my life were ruined because of it, not his. My abusers are all school teachers now. To this day, I find myself debilitated out of fear for violence they could inflict upon their students. I often find myself asking if it's my fault that they're allowed to be in a position of power over others. This moment right now is a reminder that it's not my fault, it's the whole damn system's fault.
This country proves over and over again that we don't care about survivors, that we only support survivors' moments and movements when they're politically convenient to do so. And Republicans have shown they value party power over the lives of survivors across the country. Right now, Dr. Ford has chosen to speak out against her perpetrator, Brett Kavanaugh, knowing she will face backlash, but hoping we do not put someone in a position of power over others when they have violently harmed people. We have a choice. Will we listen to her, or will we ignore her story? I am sick of living in a country run by abusers. I am sick of laws and decisions about my body and my future being made by the same people that have abused and harmed survivors' lives like mine. I am sick of claims that someone is nice outweighing a survivor's story of abuse. My abusers were probably nice too. My abusers were kind to our peers. My abusers are someone's best friend. But my abusers also assaulted and raped me. My abusers, like Kavanaugh, have caused years of pain and suffering. If Kavanaugh is confirmed, 1/3 of male justices on the Supreme Court will be alleged perpetrators of sexual violence. 1/3. If Republican senators vote to confirm Kavanaugh this week, they are making it clear that they care more about their own power than the lives of survivors. Senators, we are watching you. You have a choice. Just as abuse and assault should disqualify someone from the highest court in the land, supporting and voting in abusers should disqualify you as well. I urge our senators to stand with survivors and delay the vote until a proper investigation has been done. We cannot allow this abuse to continue.
Thank you, Sage, for sharing your story with us. My name is Dawn GANS. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. And we believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. The allegations by Dr. Ford are serious and credible. Sexual assault is a violent abuse of power and should disqualify anyone from serving on the highest court of the land. Whether you are a high school student or at a house party or a woman walking into a health center, your body should be your own. And if it is not, you are not free and you are not equal in this country. Every day, Planned Parenthood is a resource for those who have experienced sexual assault, for counseling, for STI testing and treatment, and other health care. Our doctors and nurses are often the listening ear and the strong shoulder for our patients when they have nowhere else to turn. Now it is time for people in power to listen to women. And we have been saying from day one, since he was nominated, Brett Kavanaugh is unfit to be on the Supreme Court. Judge Kavanaugh has proven over and over again in his career as a judge and during that hearing that he does not respect women and he does not respect our right to control our bodies. He refused over and over again to affirm that women have a constitutional right to safe and legal abortion. His judicial hero, he is a fanboy of the man who authored the dissent in Roe v. Wade. His leaked email told us he absolutely believes that Roe v. Wade can be overturned. His ruling against a young, undocumented woman working to deny her the abortion she wanted and was entitled to under the law. Brett Kavanaugh clearly does not trust us to make our own decisions about our lives, and we cannot protect him with our rights. Whether it was abusing his power over a young woman 30 years ago or abusing his power over women's lives as a judge, he should not be considered for a seat on our Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh is not entitled to that seat. You would hear them and think it was his entitlement. I say it's our seat. We're entitled to transparent hearings conducted with honesty and integrity. We're entitled to nominees who have empathy for the experiences of real people and their real lives. And ultimately, we are entitled to a court that will protect our rights and our liberties. Teen girls for the next 40 years should not have to look at our nation's Supreme Court and know that the person making decisions about their lives was accused of sexual assault. The question before every senator is whether or not you believe women, all women, and whether you believe we should be free and equal in this country. If you do, you cannot allow Brett Kavanaugh to serve on our Supreme Court. End this nomination now. Thank you.
Next, I wanted to introduce you to Mia IVANGROOBLY, a disabilities activist and Women's March national organizer.
Hello. Thanks for coming out. It's really raining. I'm actually from North Carolina, so we got slammed by Florence, and this is the aftermath of that. So, again, my name is Mia IVANGROOBLY. I was born with a pre-existing condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. I'm the founder and coordinator for the Women's March Disability Caucus, and I fiercely oppose the lifetime appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. I am part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA generation, and was brought up believing in my own self-agency and advocating for my own civil rights. My parents brought me up. I grew up in North Carolina, and unfortunately, because of my disability, because of my medical conditions, I had to have multiple surgeries that were required to help stabilize my condition. An eye doctor told me that I needed an elective surgery, and luckily I had parents who wanted me to make my own decisions on what I wanted to do. And so they asked me if I wanted to have this elective surgery. Now, this is after having multiple surgeries in 1 year. And what I told my parents was that I didn't feel like I needed that surgery at that time. And they respected my decision. Unfortunately, Brett Kavanaugh is not on that same wavelength. He seems to think differently, believing that people with disabilities do not have certain basic civil rights. I was appalled to find out in 2007, Kavanaugh decided to overturn a decision that allowed people with intellectual disabilities to have some of the same, to have some say in the types of elective surgeries that they would have done on their own bodies. This included abortion and eye surgery. Kavanaugh argued that accepting the wishes of patients who lack and have always lacked the mental capacity to make medical conditions does not make logical sense. But I ask, who decides who doesn't have mental capacity to make these medical decisions? Where are these boundaries? Are they done by IQ? Because research shows that IQ levels, the IQ scores are racially and culturally biased, and that they were intentionally made to measure current academic abilities and not fixed innate intelligence. I have a learning disability as well as a physical disability, and I unfortunately test poorly on many tests. Does that mean that I have no right to choose what is done to my body? His belief that disabled people, especially disabled women, lack the right to bodily autonomy greatly concerns me, especially after the latest revelation that he was accused of sexual assault of Professor Ford. This administration is asking us to trust someone who is accused of sexual assault to have an ability to choose how the government is allowed to regulate women's bodies and decisions. I implore the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate at large to think deeply about the choices that they're about to make. They must vote no on Kavanaugh and protect people like me. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Berner. I'm the General Counsel of the Service Employees International Union. I'm standing here before you in this pouring rain on behalf of our 2 million members, most of whom are women. And our members say to Christine Blasey Ford, we stand with you and we have your back. Christine Blasey Ford has done a tremendously courageous thing by publicly telling her story about Brett Kavanaugh, and her allegations must be taken seriously. We know, the workers know, that it's hard to tell the truth about our lives. It's hard to tell the truth about what happens to women, and we must believe them. Senator Grassley must postpone Thursday's vote on Kavanaugh's nomination. We must ensure that there's a thorough investigation before anything further takes place. And ignoring Christine Blasey Ford's accusations only reveal the lengths to which the Senate Republican leadership will go in order to push through this extreme nominee who wants to take away workers' rights and take away women's rights. Across the nation, women are standing up and saying no more. Here on the Supreme Court steps, we are saying no more. No more. Last week in California, 100 women janitors walked 100 miles to Sacramento to protest sexual assault on the night shift. They called upon the governor of the state of California to sign into law a law that would protect them in their workplace. And tomorrow, McDonald's workers around the country will engage in the first nationwide strike against sexual harassment. Together we say, no more! No more! No more! We stand with you, Professor Ford, and we have your back.
Hello everyone, my name is HARPER TOBIN and I'm with the National Center for Transgender Equality. That's exciting. Okay. Can you all hear me? Yeah! Woo! All right. I swear I'm not doing that. Can you hear me now? All right. Half of all transgender adults in this country are survivors of sexual violence. Those are the findings of a national survey that we conducted of nearly 28,000 transgender Americans. Okay. I have to project. Watch it. Oh, that works too. This is teamwork. We do this together, right? Thank you. I'm still okay. Okay, this is a little bit better. Transgender survivors are my friends and my colleagues and my chosen family. So many transgender people know what it means not to be believed. So many trans people know what it is to be told that what we know to be true is false and that in any case, it's our fault. So many trans people know what it means to struggle with the fear that summoning the courage to come forward could mean being put on trial yourself. And too often, the fact that their abuser is a powerful and prominent person, like Brett Kavanaugh, was all the more reason to suffer in silence. Woo! Woo! Oh, is this working again? Okay. We all have so much at stake in what happens now, in this highest profile of cases. If a professor who comes forward at tremendous personal cost with a grave and credible story is allowed to be pilloried and discarded in order to steamroll through a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land, what does that mean for the rest of us? What does that mean for every other survivor? For the survivor who isn't themselves a privileged professional? For the survivor who also has to overcome the barriers of poverty, of racism, of transphobia, to be believed? Throughout this process, we have seen warning signs of a man who would work to limit women's freedom and LGBT Americans' control over their own lives. We've seen so much about this man's past hidden from senators and the American people. We've seen a nominee evade basic questions, contradict himself, and bring his credibility into doubt. And now this. Like many of you, I'm in awe of the bravery and sacrifice of Professor Ford. Like so many survivors, including trans survivors, she was understandably afraid to come forward and publicly challenge a powerful man. Now that she has come forward, risking everything, she deserves, and the American people deserve, nothing less than a fair, comprehensive, nonpartisan investigation. And that means this week's vote cannot go forward. No way can it go forward. There are no do-overs on a lifetime appointment. There is no margin of error on a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. There is absolutely no decent reason, no defensible reason not to slow down and get this right. We've got to get it right in the name of both the integrity of our courts and the dignity of every survivor of every gender whose fate and whose choices will be all the worse if we don't. Thank you. Is this?
Hi, my name is Natalie Green, and I'm with Ultraviolet Action. And I first want to say that I identify as a survivor, and I believe women, and I believe Dr. Ford. And I wasn't even alive when Anita Hill testified, but I know that she paved the way for survivors like me. I know that she paved the way for survivors like Dr. Ford, but we cannot allow the treatment that Anita Hill received to be the same that Dr. Ford receives. Like Dr. Ford, it took me years to come forward with my story, and it took me years to hold my abuser accountable. But when I first shared my story, I was met with love and support, and we need to make sure that Dr. Ford experiences the same thing publicly. We need to be public in our support for her. We cannot shy away from that. She demonstrated tremendous courage in coming forward, knowing her name would be dragged through the mud by a party that has continuously shamed and questioned the experiences of survivors. Put simply, Dr. Ford, we have your back. And we cannot sit by and let Republicans attempt to undermine and defame her, because it's already started. Not only should we call anyone who attempts to discredit her out and hold them accountable, but we must demand that all senators take her story as serious as is called for. And every single senator, Democrats included, must decide whether they want to be the person who allows another sexual predator to join the Supreme Court. We already knew that Kavanaugh would be the final vote needed to overturn Roe v. Wade and punish millions of women. And what Christine told us just confirms what we already know, that Brett Kavanaugh has a total and complete disregard for people, and specifically women. And in a country where 1 in 6 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and we know it's significantly higher for trans women, for black women, for Native American women, we cannot afford to have Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. And before I go, I want to address this idea that there are 2 sides to every story. Brett Kavanaugh lies. Literally, just a week and a half ago, he lied to us numerous times. He cannot be trusted to answer these accusations truthfully. But what the Senate can do, and every senator, is actually start believing survivors for once. And recognize that violence against women should have no place in our society, and it certainly should have no place in our courts. The Senate must reject Kavanaugh's nomination and cancel the vote for his confirmation, because we do not need one more sexual predator on the Supreme Court.
Hello, you wet warriors out here. Thank you all for coming out. And I got my wet, soggy sneakers and I'm ready to fight. So, this is certainly a remarkable moment with echoes of the past, but also stark differences. And I can tell you one thing. Every woman in America will be watching how this unfolds, and not just in America, but around the world. Dr. Ford has come forward with a courageous account of a horrific assault by a Supreme Court nominee. More than 2 decades ago, my organization, Alliance for Justice, played an instrumental role in bringing another courageous woman's story to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Professor Anita Hill reported her harassment by Clarence Thomas and suffered all the character assassination by Republicans on the committee. I was there, and I remember the pain and outrage of that moment. Today, we as a society and Republicans on the committee face a test. 2 of the Republicans who took part in the grilling of Anita Hill years ago remain on the committee today. Have we and they learned anything in the intervening years and from the Me Too movement? We believe Dr. Ford. She came forward knowing full well the abuse that was heaped on Professor Hill and the abuse that's been heaped on other women. She should not be forced to testify, but if she chooses to do voluntarily, we respect her decision. And the rush to confirm this nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, must come to a stop. It is completely unacceptable for Republicans to continue to try to push this process forward with these grave and disqualifying allegations hanging over the nominee's head. There can be no committee vote this week. Clearly, there is more to learn, and time must be given for that to occur, lest the Senate make an egregious and irrevocable error. 27 years ago, A travesty occurred in the treatment of Anita Hill and her testimony. We are saying today, we believe women and stop the insane rush to confirm this nominee at all costs. And one other thing, very important. Let's put a little bit of realism into this. Yes, Clarence Thomas did get confirmed to the Supreme Court 27 years ago. But look what happened. It launched the Year of the Woman. We had a Democrat elected president. We had women elected to seats in the House and Senate. And some of the senators who voted for Clarence Thomas lost their seats. We can do it. Thank you all.
Hello, thank you all for braving the elements. I'm Debra Ness, President of the National Partnership for Women and Families, and I'm here to say we stand with Christine Blasey Ford. What she recounted is horrifying. Christine Blasey Ford was in high school when this happened. She was alone when she was attacked by two men. It takes courage to come forward and talk about something so traumatic under any circumstances, but especially when the deck is stacked against you, when the White House and the Senate leaders want you to just shut up and go away. Her accusations are credible. She has corroboration that predates Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. We have to stand with women all across this country in demanding that the men who run the Senate halt this confirmation process until there's been a full and fair investigation of these very serious charges. Anything else would be a gross injustice and an unforgivable insult to all women. Anything else is quite simply intolerable. We've already seen the reaction, attacks on Christine Blasey Ford's credibility, her teaching, the way she's handled the situation. We can't accept it. Christine Blasey Ford must be treated with respect. And this cannot be business as usual. We've been down this road before, as Nan just said. We can't repeat the horrible mistakes Congress made during the hearings on Clarence Thomas. The Senate's treatment of Anita Hill stands as one of the most disgraceful episodes in our country's modern history. A stark misuse of male political power. We will not let it happen again. We need to take these allegations seriously. We need a full investigation by professionals who are trained to understand sexual violence and the trauma it creates. We need Senate leaders who care about women and care about the truth. Thank you all.
Hi there. I'm Marge Baker. I'm the Executive Vice President at People for the American Way. We are a 35-year-old civil rights and civil liberties organization that has over 1.5 million members across the country. And I want to thank you for being here. As my colleague Keith at AFJ says, we don't melt, we fight, right? Okay, so there is some breaking news. It's come across Twitter that the Republicans have said there will be a public hearing. Now this is important because we want to get the story out, but a public hearing has to be a public hearing to investigate Brett Kavanaugh. right? This is not a public hearing to investigate Dr. Ford. We stand with Dr. Ford. We believe Dr. Ford. This is about, we have to demand that this hearing is fair, impartial, and is a hearing to investigate the allegations, the very serious allegations that have been brought against Brett Kavanaugh. So are you with me? We stand with Dr. Ford. So let me just tell you that in other venues we have been very, very, very active and vociferous about our strong opposition to the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. And that nomination is more firm than it has ever been. But we're here in part today because the very, very, very serious allegations brought by Dr. Ford, and wanting to make sure that we see a process that is thorough, fair, nonpartisan, and as we just said, is an investigation of the allegations brought against Brett Kavanaugh, not an investigation into Dr. Ford. Okay, so I just want to say a few things. Throughout the process of considering this nomination, Republican Senate leaders have brushed aside serious concerns with Kavanaugh's record and with his credibility, and have dismissed the need for critical documents. That's wrong and simply unacceptable for the fulfillment of the Senate's constitutional responsibility to advise and consent on such a critical nomination. This is a moment of truth for every single senator, and you can be sure that the constituents of each of these senators are watching what they do very, very closely. The Senate has a responsibility to ensure that nominees confirmed to lifetime seats on our nation's highest court meet the highest standards. As the late Senator Robert Byrd said, when new evidence arose about a Supreme Court nominee he had previously supported, that would be Clarence Thomas, he said, and I quote, "No individual has a particular right to a Supreme Court seat. If we are going to give the benefit of the doubt, let us give it to the court, let us give it to the country." And that's where we are right now. Donald Trump and his allies, including senators pushing this nomination, have far too often turned a blind eye to issues of sexual assault and women's right to control their own bodies. That's true of Trump's admissions on the Access Hollywood tape. It's true of the administration's 2018 budget, which proposed a 93% cut in funding to the Office of Violence Against Women. It's true of his attacks on choice and access to contraception, and it's true, listen to them, it's true in terms of with their efforts to paper over Dr. Ford's allegations. This pattern of hostility towards women and their fundamental right to be safe from violence is appalling, and it needs to be stopped. In his testimony, Brett Kavanaugh made clear that he was willing to lie repeatedly about his involvement with documents stolen from the Judiciary Committee by a Republican operative and his work on controversial judicial nominees. He's also been caught repeatedly mischaracterizing his own decisions in order to bypass criticism of his judicial record. His credibility in responding to these latest allegations must be judged in that light. Kavanaugh seems to be taking a page from Donald Trump, who is reported by Bob Woodward in his new book to have said in connection with sexual assault allegations, "You've got to deny, 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 and push back on these women. You've got to be aggressive. You've got to push back hard. You've got to deny anything that's said about you. Never admit." Those are Trump's words. We can't and we won't let Brett Kavanaugh and his allies get away with that. We stand with Dr. Ford. Yes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Angie Renard, and I am the Executive Director of the DC Rape Crisis Center, which is the oldest and the first rape crisis center in the country, and the only rape crisis center in Washington, D.C., standing on 46 years of service. First, let me start out by saying that it takes courage to tell your story, to own your story, to stand in your truth, to speak truth to power. It is not our job to tell someone else's story. It is our job to support survivors of sexual violence. It is our job to believe survivors of sexual violence. It is our job to create a safe enough space for survivors of sexual violence to share whatever they are comfortable with sharing. The burden of proof should not be on a survivor. Let's be clear on that. Sexual violence should not be a partisan issue. There is not a walk of life that sexual violence does not impact. Sexual violence is not a single issue because we don't live single issue lives. We don't get to dissect somebody's survivor story. That is called re-victimization. And we don't want to be a part of that. You should not want to be a part of that. Sexual violence in this country, it is a watershed moment. It is challenging the moral compass and the consciousness of a nation. And so we need to stand unapologetically against survivors of sexual violence. It is so important. It is so important that when a survivor of sexual violence comes forward, because there's so much at stake. There's so much at stake. And it doesn't matter if it happened 10 minutes ago, or 10 years ago, or 10 months ago. There is no time limit on when one comes forward. There is no time limit on that. And so we need to be really, really clear. So what I ask of you all is continue to support survivors of sexual violence. Continue to stand with survivors of sexual violence. Let folks know this is not okay. Where do you want to be? The time is always right to do what is right. The time is always right to do what is right. And so as we move forward in these coming days, it is important that we are clear. It is important that we are on the right side of history here, because Dr. Ford's story is so many stories. And we also have to remember the folks who don't feel comfortable coming forward. 1 in 5 women are sexually violated. 1 in 6 men are sexually violated. It impacts everyone. And so again, thank you all so much. And just remember that if you have been sexually assaulted, if you have been sexually violated, that it is not your fault, that we believe you and we stand with you. Thank you.
Hi guys. So I made this shirt on my way over. I already had the trust women part, but I think we all really need to state unequivocally that we trust Dr. Ford. Everything that's been said today, it's such an honor to be here with all of you and to be thinking about the fact that we even have to be having this conversation, that there's even a name on my t-shirt, that we're not just able to trust survivors and trust women, that people are still questioning her credibility after we have a polygraph, therapist notes, and her name out there. They still don't want to hear this. They still don't want to hear from her, and they still won't trust her, and that is wrong. So I'm here today with NARAL Pro-Choice America because we are here, we trust women, we trust Dr. Ford, and we are just sickened by what's going on in the Senate right now. You know, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. This weather is horrendous. I know a lot of us have been out here in freezing rain. We've been out here in the scorching heat, and we're out here today. Every single time it is worth it. There is nothing more important than fighting hard for our rights, especially reproductive freedom and bodily autonomy, which we know go hand in hand. It wasn't that hard to figure out when you look at these men that the same people who are trying to deny us our basic freedoms and reproductive rights are at times the same people who are denying us our bodily autonomy behind closed doors, and that is just wrong. We need to learn lessons from our history. We've heard so much today about Anita Hill, a brave, brave woman, Anita Hill did not need to come forward 27 years ago and have all of this happen again. She shared her story, and as she emphasized in a statement this week, it's critical that there be a fair process around all of this, and especially for Dr. Ford. She should have never had to publicly come forward, and her story is yet another proof point that Brett Kavanaugh just does not deserve to be sitting in that building for the rest of his life. We believe Dr. Ford. We trust Dr. Ford. And no senator should need anything else to oppose this nomination. There should be no other information that you need to oppose Brett Kavanaugh at this point. These sexual assault charges come on top of perjury charges. They come on top of indications of extreme views of the majority of Americans made just so clear that they stand against him. We oppose this confirmation. Americans oppose this confirmation. The fact that we're even still having this rally is ridiculous. But here we are. Put simply, Brett Kavanaugh is unfit to serve on this court. He has perjured himself. He has lied to Congress. He has demonstrated his willingness to overturn Roe versus Wade. Donald Trump knows it. He knows it. And now he's been accused of sexual assault. Brett Kavanaugh needs to withdraw his nomination. He needs to withdraw his nomination. History will remember where the senators stood on this, and frankly, we're all going to remember in 2 short months come Election Day. That's right. There is more than enough known about Brett Kavanaugh to make the decision here. His record makes it clear that he does not respect women's basic rights and bodily autonomy, and now we know that's the case in his private life too. We know Brett Kavanaugh's true colors. He has shown us throughout his professional tenure, and even in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, that a lack of respect for women and our bodily autonomy is what he is all about. His alleged behavior has no place on this highest court behind me. I just want to say thank you again. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I want to say that NARAL stands with all of you. Today has been a really tough day. It could be a really triggering day for a lot of people. I hope after this rally, everybody will take care of themselves, spend some time really reflecting on what this is all about. And thank you so much for just putting your blood, sweat, and tears in this fight, because there's nothing more important than standing up for women and standing up for human rights. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Lina Orenstein, the Fair Courts Campaign Director at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. We stand with many of you as a coalition of more than 200 organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. I want to begin by making one thing clear. I believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Yes. I believe survivors. The allegations of sexual assault against Brett Kavanaugh are incredibly serious, and the Senate Judiciary Committee and the entire Senate must immediately halt the nomination. Dr. Ford did not want to make her story public, but when details of her letter were leaked, she courageously chose to come forward. Dr. Ford deserves justice. She deserves to be heard. The Leadership Conference is calling for a fair, comprehensive, and nonpartisan investigation of Kavanaugh, and we're calling for it now. It is imperative that investigators are trauma-informed and trained to treat survivors of sexual assault with the respect and privacy they deserve. Senators and their staff are not a substitute for this process. As a nation, we must be clear about the character required of those elected and appointed to our nation's highest offices, including lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. This confirmation process has been the most partisan, reckless, and rushed process that we have ever seen. Republicans have kept a vast majority of Kavanaugh's record under lock and key, and Kavanaugh repeatedly deceived and misled the Senate during his hearing. Does that sound like a fair process to you? Yeah. What we do know about Kavanaugh's record is deeply troubling and reason for us to oppose his nomination. His decisions have undermined our civil and human rights, especially for women. He's a threat to women's right to choose,
I don't believe in her.
to our health care, to our safety, to our freedom, and to our safety and rights. Too much is at stake. We believe her. We believe Dr. Ford. We believe her. 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 So much is at stake. And this is exactly why we are here today. We must take Kavanaugh's record seriously and his behavior. We must take this deception and concealment seriously. We and the Senate must take Dr. Ford seriously. When Anita Hill came forward to share her experiences of sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas, she was also berated. She was treated as though she was the one accused of wrongdoing. We cannot repeat our shameful history. We cannot be complicit in a process that silences survivors. The Senate and media have a responsibility to learn from the lessons of the past so that survivors of sexual trauma can come safely forward and tell their stories. The Senate must halt Kavanaugh's nomination to our nation's highest court immediately. And this evening, I'm asking all of you to make your voices heard. Call your senators, light up the Capitol switchboard, demand that they commit to halt the nomination now. Thank you. Hey there, I'm Catherine Bean. I'm the Vice President for Public Policy and Advocacy at YWCA USA. I stood on these steps 1 month ago, joining sisters and allies in raising concerns about Judge Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. I said then, and I'll say again now, Judge Kavanaugh's judicial philosophy and record make clear that he is not the right choice for women. In light of the revelations of the past several days, and in particular the last 24 hours, I'm here again today as YWCA joins in the clarion call for Dr. Ford's allegations to be taken seriously and to be given careful consideration that they deserve. As the largest network of domestic and sexual violence services in the United States, YWCA sees the heavy toll that violence and trauma exact on women and children every day. The women of YWCA are on the ground in nearly every state, working with millions of women and girls from diverse communities. We see and deliver solutions, annually providing safety and support to more than 500,000 women and their children each year who are fleeing violence. We also see the tremendous toll that gender-based violence exacts from survivors. We stand with survivors in the midst of a national culture which still so often blames the survivor. I was a first-year law student when Anita Hill testified before Congress. And here we are, 25 years later, 20-some-odd years later, facing the exact same situation, and we will not stand for it. And now this weekend, what we see added is that women in leadership who provided confidentiality and choice to Dr. Ford and respected her wishes for privacy are likewise criticized and shamed, attempted to be shamed by this culture of violence in our country. To step forward as Dr. Ford has done is no easy thing, and we at YWCA applaud her strength in doing so. We implore the Senate Judiciary Committee to act on a bipartisan basis to investigate her claims and to protect her. To protect Dr. Ford, who, like many survivors, is now a target for personal destruction and harassment. These past 24 hours have made so many things crystal clear. We are living in a moment that absolutely requires a justice who understands what it's like in the real world.
where blocking court cases about sexual harassment, discrimination, or equal pay means women can't get justice. Means our LGBTQ sisters and brothers and women of color cannot get justice. This moment absolutely requires that survivors of sexual violence are heard and believed, and that we have clear answers about the character and fitness of this judge to serve on the Supreme Court. We actually need someone on the court who understands the complexities of women's lives. We need the next Justice Ginsburg, who brings her formidable intellect and real-world understanding of sexual discrimination to bear on cases that affect us all. Right. We need the next Justice Sotomayor, who understands what it means to live at the intersection of race and gender, and yes, the challenges of living with type 1 diabetes, a lifelong chronic illness. And we need a process that prioritizes fairness and justice for survivors over political expediency. We call on all senators to stand with survivors in this moment and to create the fair process for Dr. Ford's voice to be heard. Thank you.
My name is Jess Davidson. I'm the Executive Director of End Rape on Campus. I'm here representing the 3 million college students who will be sexually assaulted this fall, but I'm also here today to represent myself. I was born in 1994 after the passage of the Violence Against Women Act. I was not even alive when Anita Hill gave her brave testimony in the building across the street. And I truly grew up in a different world. I grew up in a world where we had a framework for what it meant to support survivors. We still live in rape culture, don't get me wrong, but by the time that I was raped on campus in 2015, I had a system for support. I knew what the Violence Against Women Act was. I knew what Title IX was. I knew that there were resources for me, and though it was exceptionally challenging to use them and to come forward with my story, I knew that I could. I lived in a different world because I had lived under an administration, the Obama administration, that knew what it meant to create a government that believed and supported survivors, or to at least strive toward it. I came forward with my story in February of 2016, and I was student body vice president. I came out as a survivor publicly, and my work actually got picked up by the Obama White House. I was extremely honored to receive an award from them, to go on and intern in the White House Office of Public Engagement. And I was working there in fall of 2016 when I heard a candidate to take over the very same office that I had come into by way of my work to challenge sexual violence, proclaimed proudly that they had assaulted a woman. I remember for weeks afterward having dream after dream about my rapist sitting in the Oval Office because the man who was about to fill it reminded me so much of the person who had sexually assaulted me. I, for the first time as a young adult, knew what it meant as a survivor to walk through a world where my government did not want to fight for my rights as a survivor, to live in a government and in a world where a person who committed sexual violence was being charged. And since then, I have slowly lost my faith in institutions that survivors, for the first time, thought we were going to start being seen by. This is extraordinarily devastating as somebody who's always been extremely idealistic and who knows what it feels like. But you know what? We know what it feels like to see a government start to take the first steps toward believing survivors, toward an institution that can create space for survivors, have task force in the West Wing and in that building across the street for survivors, for decisions in this building behind us that make survivors' lives easier, not harder, to get access to the resources and the health care that we need. And so I'm standing here in front of you because I still believe in that world. I am sad today. Don't get me wrong, I am so sad, and I am so scared about what is to come. I am so scared for Dr. Christine Ford, and I pray that this country and the people in these institutions treat her the way that we have proclaimed to treat survivors. We say we believe them, we support Me Too. But you know what I want to say to the men across the street from us right now? Prove it. You say that you believe survivors, prove it. You say that you support women because you have women in your life, because you have daughters, because you have a wife, because you feel that it's what you have to say to continue to be elected and not lose the vote. Prove it. Survivors deserve so much better than what the institutions behind me, in front of me, and down the street on Pennsylvania Avenue are giving, and we can demand that world. We can see it recreated again. The little inkling of what I felt when I walked through the halls of the White House every day, and in an administration that cared about survivors, that listened to my voice as a survivor and the voices of other campus survivors around the country, we can create that. But this group of people, survivors, women, our allies, cannot do it alone. We need to call on everybody, every person who has ever said that they support me too, that they believe her, that they believe that this is important, that they believe him. This is a critical moment. So everybody who's listening right now, not just survivors, but people who have no necessary personal stake in this issue at all, we need you to create a world where people like me can have faith in institutions of government again and can receive the services and the access that we need. Earlier this fall, Mitch McConnell got on a press conference and he said, "I believe the women." Mitch, prove it.
Well, thank you everyone, for coming out and supporting everyone that's been speaking today, for supporting survivors. You bared with us in the rain, and we cannot appreciate you enough. So I, want to say a special thank you to all the brave women who shared their stories with us today.
Thank you!
So we have a chance now. We have a chance to show that we stand with survivors. We have a chance to show that we stand with Dr. Ford. On Monday, it's just been announced there will be a public hearing, and Dr. Ford will be testifying. So that is our opportunity to stand with Dr. Ford. So if we can just round out and close out with a quick chant, stand with Ford, to show where we are and to tell the Senate, tell that building, tell all the members, tell them that we mean business, that we stand with survivors, we stand with Ford, and they better listen to us women. Stand with Ford! 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 Thank you! Stand with Ford!
Your umbrella.